Welcome, 6th graders, to your video lesson on dividing decimals. Don't panic. I know some of you can't stand division and some of you panic at decimals. Don't. You are going to use your prior knowledge on basic facts, on multiplying and dividing to help you through this lesson. We're also going to use our understanding of estimating with those basic facts. So, nothing to fear. We are going to think about what we do know to help us with what we don't know yet. First things first, you are going to write down the steps for what we do if we are dividing a decimal number by a whole number. That's different than what we're going to see on the next slide. So think first, step one you're going to write down is we are going to place a decimal point directly above the number under the division bracket. Step two is we are going to divide to find the quotient. So pretty easy, but again, step by step, we're not robots, so we're going to use estimation also to help check our answer for reasonableness. So before you even start dividing, let's estimate first. Make sure you have written those down, and then we'll get started. So looking at this first one, we want to look, we're dividing 94 hundredths, so a number less than 1, and we're dividing that by 3 wholes. So what we want to think about is that 3 cannot fit into 94 hundredths. It can't. It's a bigger number. It can't fit in there one whole time. So that means my answer should be less than 1 whole. So I'm going to try to divide. So like the directions say, step 1 is that I'm going to place. So we remember, if number first goes, we're trying to figure out how many times does 3 fit into 94 hundredths. Since I'm dividing by a whole number, one thing you need to remember is that the decimal in a whole number is right there. So we are dividing by a whole. We're going to move this decimal right up top. So we're going to divide as normal. 3 does not go into 0. 3 goes into 9 3 whole times. 3 times 3 is 9. None left over. Going to the next place by bring down my 4. 3 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. With 1 left over. Here now, we'll talk about, we're going to continue. We're not going to just do remainder. We're going to continue because what's behind the decimal, to the right of the decimal, is the remainder. And we'll continue to talk about that as we get into fractions and dealing with decimals. We had a remainder of 1. We're going to bring down the next place, our thousands there. 3 goes into 10. We know 3 times for 9. 1 left over. And what you're going to notice is we're going to keep getting 1 left over. So we know that my 3 here is going to repeat. So one little important note is that this is called bar notation, and that is what is used for when a decimal continues to repeat. So notice my estimate was less than 1 whole, and I got a quotient of 313 thousandths with that 3 repeating. The bar notation just goes over that 3 because that's the only one that's going to continue to repeat that way. All right, looking at the next one. Again, if you have questions or pause, you need to go back and rewind. That's great. So on this one, I'm going to estimate first. What I notice is that this is close to 90. 90 divided by 6. I'm thinking in my head, and you don't need to write all this down if you don't want to, but this is what I know. I know that 60 times 10, 6 times 10, is 60. 6 times 5 is 30. So that tells me that 6 times 15 is 90. So I think estimating that my quotient should be close to 15. That's my estimate. Okay, so I'm just going to shrink this down so I can give it a try. Put my estimate over there. All right, so let's divide. So again, I'm going to place that first number. Trying to figure out how many times 6 goes into 94 and 21 hundredths. Dividing by a whole number, so my decimal can go right up top. I know that 6 goes into 9 once. 3 remaining. I know that 6 goes into 34 5 times for 30 with 4 remaining. Notice I'm bringing down. I'm staying directly above the place I'm working in. 6 goes into 42 7 whole times exactly. None remaining, but I'm not done. I have to finish all the place values here. So I'm in the hundredths place. 6 does not go into 1, but that does not mean I'm done. So I have to bring down my next place. 6 goes into 10. I know once for 6. 4 left over. Continuing on. 6 goes into 40. Again, I know 6 times for 36. I'm running out of room here. 4 left over. So that 4 tells me I know I'm going to continue getting 4 remainders, which means that that 6 is going to repeat. So my quotient here was 15 and 7,016 10,000ths with that 6 repeating. So I use the bar notation. Okay, a couple more examples here and more steps to write down. So on the previous slide, we did decimal divided by a whole number. Now there are different steps for when you're dividing a decimal by a decimal number, okay? So again, write down these steps, pause and do that. Some other things I want you to remember is, again, we are going to be estimating to focus on what we do know to guide us to what we don't know yet. One thing you'll notice is that on some of these, we're going to be dividing by numbers that are greater than 1, and then some of them we're going to be dividing by numbers that are less than 1. One little note you should make is that when you are dividing by a number that is less than 1, your result, that will result in a quotient that is greater than what you started with. And if you think about that, why that makes sense. If you think about a bucket that you are going to fill with marbles or golf balls. Well, marbles are smaller, so you will need more of them to fit inside the space. And we'll look at visuals like that to help us understand. Make sure that you have written down these decimal by decimal steps. I like to call it skip, skip, hop, and you will see why. But what we're going to do is essentially we're trying to make the number we're dividing by into a whole number. And then we're going to place, once it's a whole number, we're going to place the decimal in the spot that it goes. So let's watch and see how that will work. Right? Now, of course, this didn't move. So, looking at this first one, 12 and 6/10 divided by 3/10. Well, 3/10 is a small number. What I know is that 3/10 fits into one whole about 3 times, a little bit more. So that means it's going to fit in 12 holes at least 36 times. So I know right now that my answer is going to be greater than 36. That's my estimate. So I'm going to set it up. I'm going to move this to be, I'm just dividing by 3. But that's really like multiplying by 10. To keep things equivalent, we're also going to do the same thing over here. And then place it up top. Skip, skip, hop. So here I'm going to treat this as 3 does not go into 1. 3 goes into 12 4 whole times. None left over. 3 goes into 6 2 whole times with none left over. So that my quotient here is 42. My estimate, remember, was that it should be greater than 36, and it is. On this next one, I might estimate by saying about 26 divided by about 2, I know is 13. So my answer should be around 13. That doesn't mean it has to be 13 something, but it should be around that, not like 30 or 130. It should be around 13. Same thing, step 1, I'm going to make this a whole number, which means right now I'm really kind of multiplying by 100, moving the decimal 2 to the right. So then to keep this equivalent, I'm going to do the same thing here. Place my decimal up top. Skip, skip, hop. Divide as normal. So now I'm really looking at this as 236 going into 264. That would be 1 time, staying right above that 4. Subtracting those, I end up with 28. Bring down my next place, my 3. Notice I'm right above there. Sometimes it gets tricky if we write sideways. I know that 236 goes into 283 1 time. Again, finding the remainder here, I subtract and get 47. Bring down my 2. Notice I'm writing kind of big, so I start to get slanted. So it's important that I know what place I'm working in. Then I think, okay, well, 200 times 2 is 400. 36 times 2 is 72. Aha! 236 times 2 is 472. None left over, so I don't need to continue to bring zeros down. So my answer, my quotient, is 11 and 2/10, That's fairly close. That means my decimal's in the right space. Last one, maybe you're going to be brave and give this one a try on your own. Remember, first thing I like to do is estimate. So I might try this estimating a couple different ways. What I'm thinking right now is that I'm going to round to about 80 and 1, since 1.5 is between 1 and 2. I know that 80 divided by 1 would be 80. I know that 80 divided by 2 is 40, so I know that it's somewhere between 80 and 40. That's what I could say. It's a middle estimate between there. Another thing I could do is use my multiplication facts that I know. I know that 15, once I move that decimal, I'm treating that as a 15 anyways. I know that 15 times 6 is 90. And I know, okay, well, let's see, minus one more 15, that's 75, which is fairly close to that 80. So that's kind of giving me a vibe there that maybe I should start with 5. So I'm looking at this as 15 going into 8. Nope. Goes into 83. I know that from my estimate. 5 times. With 8 remaining. 15 then goes into 82. 5 times. For 75. With 7 remaining. Bring down that 5. Goes in there. We already know 5 times with none remaining. It's okay to have a multiplication chart out too, you guys. So what I see is that my answer was 55.5, which definitely fits in with my estimate, so I know my decimal's in the right spot. So some of this might be a little overwhelming, you guys, but you can do it. Couple reminders on the next slide. Might be a blank page. You might have not have that slide right below. So what we need to remember is that estimation is going to help us check for reasonableness. Okay? We are going to not just move on when we get to an answer. We are going to look at our answer and say, does it make sense based on the question I was given? Okay? One more thing that isn't in here, I want you to remember on a whole number, the decimal is at the end. So even if you don't see it, it's there. So if you come up on a question like 30 divided by 1.5, and you have to move that decimal here, then you know, oh, it's right there. I'm going to move it once, and I probably have to fill in with a 0. So look out for that also. Remember to do your best. One other key thing when you're making estimates is if you are dividing by a number that's less than 1, you're probably going to need a lot of them. Good luck.